So I'm here with Alex Vella, and
Yes.
for how you doing, Alex?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Now, for many of
Good.
you, Alex will need no introduction. You already know her from Instagram, from her being co-host of the Aquascaping Type podcast,
Yeah.
um,
YouTube
and
channel. Yeah.
very active. If you've ever been to an Aqua Shella, you've probably seen or talked to Alex as well. Always very active there in the Owaza booth, and just and all over really. So, Alex, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm like your fourth guest. That feels like insane to me, but
Number
yeah, thank
five,
you
but
so
yeah,
much for
they're in the top 10. So yeah,
yeah. Thanks for choosing me.
yeah.
I'm so happy
So
to be on.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
So Alex, the reason I was most intrigued, I think, to bring you on today is I know a little bit of your story of just kind of how you got into aquascaping, and I think it's one that it resonates with a lot of people, or I find that a lot of people come to the aquarium hobby by sort of a similar path or journey. Um, so tell us about how you got into aquascaping and why it means so much to you.
Yeah, so I got into aquascaping. I think it was almost 3 years ago now. I mean, I had always had aquariums and I started with saltwater tanks, I would say like 10 years ago. But aquascaping came to me about 3 years ago. So it it was kind of a long journey and a long research process. But when my dad passed away, I was struggling a lot with my mental health. Sorry, my cat is going crazy over here. I
That's
think
okay.
he sees another cat.
My dogs will start barking soon as well, so it's fine.
So, yeah, so when my dad passed away, I was struggling a lot with my mental health and I was having like a lot of complex grief because there was just a lot of complications around his death and he had like stage 4 cancer and he was in the hospital for quite a long time and I was his pretty much full-time caregiver for a while after that. So I kind of felt like I had lost my purpose and because being his caregiver kind of became my purpose for a little bit. And I was kind of looking for a way to manage my grief. And I had actually worked at a meditation company. And so for a while there, I had done traditional forms of meditation. It was called Muse, and it was like a meditation headband. So it's actually like partnered with neuroscience and it tracks your brain waves and kind of tells you if like you're meditating correctly or if you're getting into like a focus state or a flow state. But I wasn't able to. And I was like I had a lot of anxieties, I had a lot of trouble concentrating and a lot of time with like intrusive thoughts around my father's death and just other things in general, like other, things that were going on in my life at the time and I felt like I wasn't able to cope. So I always found joy in my reef tanks, but to me a reef tank isn't the same as a planted aquarium, whereas like it doesn't feel as artistic. And I'm a very creative person, and my job is a motion designer, and I've always been into animation and I've always been into graphic design. So I felt like this was an extension of like art to me. And so when I started aquascaping, I was using it as an escape. I was using it as a form of meditation, and I was using it kind of, yeah, as a way to have my artistic brain kind of enter that flow state, which I wasn't able to do during meditation. And I found that it really did help with my grief and it gave me a new sense of purpose. And I found that it helped calm me. And, and I wanted to share that with people. So, pretty immediately, while starting aquascaping, I started my Instagram and I wanted to kind of share education with people. So I would make these little posts about like, you know, how to how to tie your plants to your wood or whatever, and like stuff like that. So I always kind of, I didn't feel like aquascaping was only art for me. It was also like a way to connect with other people and educate other people. And so kind of after that, I started my YouTube channel, and then, my I met like people online, and I started going to Aqua Shellas, and I started really kind of involving myself in the community in person, because that's what I felt like I needed. It was kind of through COVID that I was aquascaping, so it felt very isolating. So the moment I felt like I could leave my house and finally meet these people is exactly what I did. So that's kind of when I met you. It was one of my first trips, aquascaping. I went to Texas and I went to your store, and yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. But I mean, there's many intricacies
Oh, sure, sure.
and little things that happened along the way. But yeah, that's kind of an overview of my journey, I would say.
Yeah, and I find it so. It's something I've spoken on before, that the aquarium, it has this power, and it's really intrinsic, and I think it's well known, even to people that don't keep aquariums. Yet it's a little bit, it still may be a bit untapped or kind of unexplored at depth in the hobby. That's just this aspect for this meditative quality, this whole thing where, again, there's even actual scientific research, the real empirical stuff, where they show that just looking at an aquarium lowers the heart rate, the blood pressure, the brainwave states, all of this favorable feedback in this transaction that sort of happens without any real effort. I mean, you're just looking at something. And yeah, I'm just always so, it's just, I love knowing that that's so real. That has such a real impact on people's lives and their well-being, and the therapeutic dimension, and just helping them recover from trauma and all that. I mean, to me, and it's sort of a question too, that really should be what we're maybe leading with, or putting a little more emphasis on than, I think if that dimension got even half of the attention that, say, an aquascaping contest gets in the hobby, that would be kind of cool. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for that reason, I would love to visit Floresta submersus, because I feel like that is where people use it for the meditative qualities.
Yeah.
And and same with your store, like the gallery. That was one of the main reasons actually that I wanted to start my own little gallery and little store, was because um, I just, when you walk into your gallery, like you're hit with smells, you're hit with sounds, you're hit with a fully immersive experience, and that is what aquascaping was to me in a nutshell. Like I just I just related to you and your gallery so much, and I 100% agree that it should be the first thing that we think about when we are aquascaping, is the meditative qualities. Like I'm not interested in water chemistry. I'm not interested in maintenance as much. I mean, maintenance can have its own meditative qualities, absolutely, but the looking at the art and the um, just being there with it and being present is what speaks to me the most. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And even with the, with the gallery setting too, foremost, it is attempting to be a business also. I mean, it needs to sell some things to operate, but it just seemed like the most obvious thing, And I think it's kind of, it speaks to what you're doing there with your, let's just say more than one uh, layout there in your house. um, you know, it
Gotta
starts
keep.
to get a little more immersive, or it's really just kind of focusing on the part that we want it for in the first place. In other words, nobody nobody got an aquarium so that they could own a filter. You don't get an aquarium. You don't get into aquascaping. You don't keep fish so that you can tell your friends that you have a tube that heats water, or I have a lot of lights in my house already. I don't need any more lights. I didn't get it for another light. So in other words, it's just a funny way of saying that to lead with the part that we really want it for is sort of the objective. And, and sure enough, that's the part that has the actual impact on our well-being, on human well-being. And, yeah, it's just something, I think we would all, when we stop and think about it, love to see a little more leading with that, so, and I think you've probably discovered that dimension in a big way there again in your own home. It's been following your posts on Instagram, et cetera, for a long time, and you've really made quite a home studio, home gallery kind of space, which has been a trend. Also, I've seen so much more of that on social media, which I think is just the coolest thing. Like, I'm just really into that. I kind of wish I could have one at home myself, but I got to be honest, I come home sometimes and it's just a bit much to also then continuing maintaining aquariums, But yeah, so how many layouts, how many total setups do you have in the house there now?
8.
I'm glad you don't keep an actual count. That's cool too. You just
I
set them
know, and
up
I just
as needed.
had to look around. I had to
Yeah.
look around.
Yeah.
Um, I have quite a few, and my apartment is 700 square feet.
Okay.
So it
It's mostly a
is
gallery at this point then.
when it's mostly a gallery at this point. Like when you walk into my house, there are 6 or 7 aquariums that you see right away. And I mean, I've paid very close attention with how I've like decorated my home and like the interior design of my home because it's so small. I feel like I really need to make everything an art piece and everything very cohesive because that's exactly what it is. It is a gallery. It's not just like I can't have equipment out, like everything is hidden away. Um, you can't see any of the equipment. It's all like strategically hidden because this is like the first thing you see when you walk into my house. So yeah, but I just can't stop. I have so many of them, and I cycle through them sometimes. But there are some that I become really attached to, and that I've had for quite a long time. But yeah, this has become such a passion for me, and again, such a source of meditation and calm, and it's become a necessity in my life, especially because I have bipolar disorder, and there's a lot of different moods that I go through, and it is like the way that I ground myself.
Mhm.
So, and it's all on display. So you can tell what
Wow.
my mood is by looking at my aquariums and by the maintenance levels that I've had or whatever. But yeah, it's all very, very open to everybody who walks in.
Yeah. So I know you also, at one point, obviously became into this enough to start a podcast. It's called the Aquascaping Type, and you take a you and Ryan take a little kind of a different approach on there too, which I think is cool. I like the back and forth sort of conversation that you guys have as part of the dialogue. It looks like a potentially a tricky editing situation to do.
Yeah.
How do you
It's
guys
actually
do
not
that
too.
exactly?
Yeah, so we are on FaceTime together. I have an
Okay.
AirPod in, he has an AirPod in. Um, and we have a script written and we say it to each other. So we're talking to each other and then I am filming on my side, he's filming on his side, and we kind of just cut back and forth with the two cameras. And
Okay, so
it
it is a
flows pretty nicely.
conversation. Yeah.
It is a conversation, yeah. I think we're getting better at making it seem a bit more seamless. I think that'll
Right.
just come with time. But yeah, it is a conversation, a scripted conversation most of the time. I think we want to do a little bit more like improv and stuff as we get more comfortable on camera. But yeah, for now, especially with like the interviews and stuff that we do, it's all pretty scripted. But we have so much fun with it. We've been doing it for about, I want to say, a year and 2 months now. And yeah, it's been going pretty well. We're trying to get a video out a week, which
It's
is
tough.
tough. It's
It is
very
tough.
tough.
Sounds easy.
It's
I got one
very
video a week. I can do that. And then you're like, oh,
yeah,
wait a minute. It's already Friday again.
yeah, exactly. And I think because we do like elements of motion design, which is like my job regularly, so we add in a lot of animation. That adds an extra layer to the editing process, and it takes a lot of time. So we're just trying to find a balance and trying to find the time for editing and all of that. But so far
Yeah.
it's been working. We've been doing that for the past like I want to say six weeks. We've been doing a video a week. We're trying to come out with one today. So after I get off this call, I have to do some editing. But
Sure.
yeah, we have an interview with Andre Longarso, and
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
yeah, we're
Great
doing
guy.
part one of that today, and then
Yeah.
part two of that next week. But he's an incredible guy. We got to speak to him when he was at AGA a few months ago, and man, like, wow, he has some crazy life experience. He knew Takashi Amano. He studied with Takashi Amano, and yeah, he had a lot of really important things to say
Yeah.
about
And
yeah,
he's been around a long time, and definitely was there in the early days.
Mhm.
I would first met those guys on my first trips to Japan way back in the day, and he's been was really instrumental too in the development of the Brazilian style. He's really kind of
Yeah,
one of those cornerstone figures in what's become a widely recognized sort of official aquascaping category, which I
yeah,
think is so interesting that we've even that we that we're that we even have such categories now. I think is just really cool, and that we're at a time in the history of it where we can still know the people that were behind it is really neat. So yeah, I look forward to that interview. He's just a really sweet guy too. Just a great person.
yeah. He was
Just a
lovely.
great energy.
Yeah, I definitely cried after the interview because he's
Really,
just so touching, and he was
he
talking
is.
about yeah, his experiences with just his family and like how important like wabi sabi is to him, and
Mm,
just I won't give any spoilers because you need to watch it.
sure, sure.
It's
No, I
so
look forward
good,
to it.
and yeah, he's incredible, really.
Awesome. Yeah. So um, I know we also always see you really active at the Aqua Shella. I think if I'm not, you've been at every Aqua Shella, I think, so far, right?
I started going to the first one, I think it was Chicago 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was like a few years that I didn't go when I wasn't really in the hobby. And I think COVID, they stopped them for a while. So I think I missed two, but I think I've been to everyone since then. And I intend to go to everyone going forward because it's just where I meet my friends and where I get to be super creative, and it's the most fun. You've been there. It's so fun.
Yeah, no, it's a cool
Yeah.
event for sure.
Mhm.
So you got your start in marine tanks, but now
Mhm.
that's you're still doing the macroalgae layouts.
Yes, I have my macroalgae tank still. It's going well. It's going like it's pretty strong. I've had it established since I want to say February 2021. So it's been up for quite a while. Um, it and I love it. I love it so much. It's the perfect balance between planted aquascaping and reef tanks. It's like
Yeah.
the perfect medium where you can have like where it feels like intentional, you know?
Right.
Whereas a reef tank doesn't feel to me um, as artistic, I think. Or it hadn't to me in the past, but maybe I just didn't explore that side of corals and stuff. I think things just grow differently and it's, the blue light is different and
Right.
yeah.
You don't need to have there's no particular reason for the more intense blue spectrum with a macroalgae tank, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
That's more
and
for the algae that live within the tissues of the corals, is more the emphasis on that. It's more of a coral thing, the blue light. So,
yeah.
because I'm even seeing some macroalgae scapers working with, I've seen a Chihiros, just a straight up Chihiros Vivid RGB over their
Yeah.
macroalgae tank, or using freshwater planted tank lighting. And the macroalgae appear to be just fine with that. Um, would that be your experience too? That the spectrum
Yeah.
situation, because people hear saltwater and I think a lot of people have the notion of that blue light or that look, but it's not necessarily the
Exactly.
case with the macros.
No, macro's so different. I have an ONF flat 1 plus above my macroalgae tank, and it has the blue light spectrum built in, but I mean, I've never used it, and they seem to be very happy. Um, yeah, I've literally never had any issues. I would say the bigger thing is to fertilize and make sure that
Okay.
you're fertilizing. So I use
What are you
like
using for
Brightwell.
that?
Yeah, I use Brightwell Aquatics, Chato Grow, and Neophos. And yeah, I think those are the two that I use. But I think you can pretty much use any like all-in-one fertilizer for that, really. And um, yeah,
You feel like you could
they do really
actually,
well.
you feel like you could actually could you use like a planted tank, freshwater fertilizers for that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've seen people use those. I'm pretty sure, I want to say Tyler, his Instagram is Inland Reef, and he's like the expert on macroalgae tanks. He's the one that
Okay.
I go to for all of the information on macroalgae, and he's used regular fertilizers, like planted tank fertilizers for it, because it's the same thing. Like you're adding phosphates, you're adding nitrates into the tank. It's essentially the exact same. So
Okay.
I wouldn't see there being any difference.
That's interesting for sure.
Yeah.
That kind it was I think it's still there's not a ton of focused info out there. It's definitely growing, but it's still something that's a little uh it's not centralized like aquascaping and other kinds of aquarium keeping is just yet. I've found just dabbling with it a little bit myself that they're it requires care like anything, but they're pretty easy. I mean, it's not
I yeah.
they're
I've
not
found it to
super
be
hard to grow.
that I've had. I mean, I think I set it up for myself to make it as easy as possible. So I used Live Rock that was already established for months and months. So I avoided that initial algae bloom.
Mm.
And then you can add the algae, like the macroalgae in right away. And it's essentially like a big refugium because it's a filter. Like the algae,
True.
the way that the stores usually sell macroalgae is to put in like a sump or something as a
True.
way of filtering out your water. So it cleans itself. I do a water change like once a month. Like it really I don't really need to pay close attention to it at all. Yeah,
That's
it's
yeah.
great.
I didn't connect those dots actually until you said it just now. That it does. There is almost a how is it different from a refugium really in terms of at least the use of macroalgae in there, and the natural kind of
Mhm.
scrubbing that's doing of the water. That's a cool concept. I like that. That becomes sort of a selling point for it. Actually, I mean, that's something I think people have a
Yeah,
hesitation because they're growing something. Anytime you're growing something in an aquarium, there's all this baggage that comes along with it in terms of your thought process about it, and this battle against algae and all the other things. Well, we're growing algae here, so I mean,
yeah, exactly. I
if you
haven't really
use
had
it,
any issue. I have the only thing I've struggled with is red cyano at the bottom of the tank. Sometimes, if I don't do a water change for a month and a half, it'll appear. But other than that, I haven't had any issues, and I think that's the reason because it is in itself a big filter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they don't require as intense a light source as I sort of imagined. I mean, you need lighting on there, but it doesn't need to be really bright. Definitely not, planted tank or reef aquarium level intensity. I find is not necessary at all for them to do very well.
No, and they're very hardy in my experience, and
Yeah.
you don't really, especially I have this one, it's called, oh man, I'm gonna butcher the name, but it's Pom Pom Gracillera Hei. And you can put that in a plastic bag, and I've done that before to leave it out for people that are coming to like pick some up from me, and you can just leave it out for like 2 weeks in that plastic bag without a water change, without anything, just close in that bag, and it will be 100% fine. And yeah, so do macroalgae if you haven't, if that's that
Yeah.
is what I want
Yeah.
to tell the world.
I'd love to see more progression with it. We actually tried it at the aquarium design store, and
Cool.
it really it wasn't selling very well. But I think that's just lack
Mhm.
of just people don't know about it. Now there was quite a few reef guys that would buy it for their sumps. Some of the reef keepers
Yeah.
were onto it. For just something else to throw in a refugium.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the scaping side of it still is something I think people don't know enough. And your even my initial notion of it was going to be challenging. It's probably not going to, this is going to grow, but that's not going to grow, et cetera. And so far, all the ones I've worked with have, I mean, I haven't had a problem. I haven't done anything for them actually.
Yeah.
They've done well. So it's like anything. There's probably just a bit of, it's just information. Just the information needs to get out
Yeah.
there more once people know, because they're definitely the availability is going up and all of that. I mean, we were able to get tons of cool varieties and everything. I think just people look at it and aren't sure. You know what it is. I really didn't do a dedicated display with it like that.
Mm.
That's what that takes. I think that's always what that takes. Otherwise, people are just
Yeah.
seeing it in the holding tank unless they've already seen it online or something. They don't know what to make of it. Um,
Even if you did like a dedicated nano display with like tiny bits of it here and there, I think that would do wonders. People just need to see it. I get comments and messages all the time where people say like, "What is that freshwater plant?" And I'm
yeah,
like, "This is a saltwater tank." Like, and people don't realize that. And I'm trying to bridge that gap. Like that's what I want to do. I want to be able to bridge the gap between reef keeping and aquascaping because there and have reef keeping be aquascaping because there seems to be such a divide, and I don't think, yeah, there just doesn't need to be. There's so many similarities, and yeah, I mean, you've bridged that divide in your gallery, but I think not
I've
a lot of people
tried.
are.
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge that I've found with that, with making taking more of a composition based approach to the
Mm-hmm.
traditional reef tank, is the it needs its own sort of identity, and I don't know that it hasn't gotten that in any kind of replicatable way or any kind of like philosophical way like aquascaping did. By all the different things, by the time we even know what aquascaping is, Amano had given us a huge spectrum of possibilities based on kind of the same core principles.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of the aquarium having some kind of compositional philosophy going in, and that could actually be effective by being also very simple, or it could be one species of plants, it could be two or three. It didn't have to be elaborate to have a high degree of impact.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 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 problem I see with the reef tank, and I'm just curious if you agree, from having done both and tried to take that compositional approach, is the format. In other words, the way that you buy coral, for example, is can be difficult to do just the thing that you want to do with it. And by that I mean, like, sometimes you need you might need more than one of something. That's kind of how the basic principles of aquascaping and freshwater work. If there's some over on the left side, there's some over on the right side too. Or, there might be more on the left, but there's a little bit on the right also. It's just a very sort of primitive way of putting it, but kind of creating that balance. Whereas oftentimes in the reef aquarium, there's this sort of collection of corals, or it's more, well, I have one of those. And if I get another one, it's got variations to it that don't necessarily balance with the other one I have, or it's a more practical problem, like the base of the coral,
they're on a frag.
the skeletal structure, it'll be different. Or if it's, even if it wasn't a frag, it would be, one has there's 2 inches of kind of skeletal base. And then you got this other one that was cut, and it has only a half an inch, and it's very flat. And you're trying to work that into this rock structure. And, or you see the thing too, where the rock structure is compositional, but now you have to start putting coral on it, and kind of maintaining that throughout is a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I found. I tried to create a composition, and then the second you put corals in and they have their own shapes, it muddies that, and
Right.
it doesn't come across as clearly. And so that's why I really was interested in macroalgae, because you can easily like stuff it into crevices. You can shape it exactly like it's a plant, right? You can't cut a coral. You can't just shape it to the way you want. It'll kill it. So
Or
it's very different.
sometimes you can in a certain way, but then there's a long period of recovery, and if you've got a big leather coral and you quote unquote frag a piece of it off, there's a time for that, but it's just it's a different equation. And I think what happened was that the coral collecting side of it became the thing, because it was just easier to acquire cool corals and enjoy them as a specimen. And the idea of maybe limiting the palette in the pursuit of making a composition was just sort of lost in the reef keeping, kind of just the culture, what was driving the availability, and like how things are presented in a retail store and all of that. It's just a harder thing to translate. And that's why I think when you do see it, it's pretty cool. Like when you do see that, where somebody took the intentional approach and it worked, it sort of hits in a different way. But maybe you found this to be true also, where it sort of falls a little flat on the reef hobby, I find, because now they seem to be sort of calibrated to look for, there's different markers for what an awesome reef aquarium is, besides the compositional approach.
Yeah, I think it's, again, what you said, it's like a collector's hobby. And that was what I found too. Like I had been reef keeping for 10 years, and I didn't find the meditative elements like that. And it didn't feel the same to me. And again, it wasn't like the same goal I had in mind. I had the collector's mindset. I was like, look at this incredible coral that I have. Look at this amazing fish that I have. It wasn't about like the art behind it for me personally, but I know it can be for some people. I think there's just a bit of a disconnect in general.
You get that total underwater scene vibe, I think, is what's so attractive about the freshwater aquascaping approach. What I call the nostalgic underwater scene, which is a term I completely, the use of the word nostalgic very much comes from, that was translated, but that was probably a pretty specifically translated word, but it was, that is something Amano wrote, that reference to nostalgia. I believe it's in one of the 3 Nature Aquarium World books. But there was this, when I thought nostalgia, wow, that's really framing that thing that it's
Mhm.
not a literal scene. It's not a biotope. You're not trying to recreate something specific, but rather just something that's kind of in your subconscious, or just something that resonates when you see it, probably just, from millions of years of humans being around water and water environments and just all of that. But that word nostalgia really kind of hits, and I think that could speak to whatever that meditative thing
Mhm.
is, like maybe it's tapping into something there that's beyond kind of the thinking mind. um,
Yeah,
how you feel about
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, I know. I 100% agree. I've heard you say that before. Um, and yeah, it speaks to me like again on a meditative level, and that I relate to that quite a bit. Um, I would love to see, yeah, you said that there's studies of people
Yeah.
looking at the plants and feeling meditative aspects. I would love to. I'm going back to the company I worked for. I think it would be really cool to wear the headband and be able to like see my brain and maybe do like a YouTube video or something on that
Yeah,
to see kind of how I'm affected by that. Um, because yeah, that's exactly it.
that's a great
Nostalgic
idea.
underwater.
That's a
Yeah,
that's a really cool idea. I think more content like that, at least mixed
yeah.
in, would be
Mhm.
super useful. Yeah, that's one of those things. There was, uh, it goes back. I mean, I can remember. I would say even I have clear memories from, say, late '90s, early 2000s, whatever. And people would send me that newspaper article or whatever, back when people read the newspaper. But that's how I would see. Even, that goes way back. People would know obviously that I did aquarium installation, aquarium maintenance, this kind of stuff, and so um, I would see over the years these different articles, sometimes from a local newspaper, and there again, that was somebody kind of sharing it with you, um, et cetera, where it was just something on aquariums. Kind of, it usually was something to do with why there's an aquarium in your dentist's office, um,
Yeah.
and all of that. And it would always go on to say that there was just a clear and pretty and well understood thing that happens. I've always said, you got a lot going on there. You've got, there's water, there's life in the water. These be it the plants or whatever animals you have in there. I mean, the fish themselves are little isolations of life. It's the
Mhm.
character, the personality, all that kind of stuff. The behaviors, everything. And so you got two very potent things there with the water and the life. You bring in composition, or like where it's sort of thoughtfully arranged, and wow, what a combination. I mean, what it just makes sense. That would be something that resonates so much with people. Do
Yeah.
you have any interest in uh, other? Do you ever look at like cichlids or even smaller like Tangigan shell dwelling kind of fish, things like, I mean, does any of that realm attract you, or do you see any possibility there for scaping, etc.?
I do. I would love to have a cichlid. Like I just don't have the room for it because they require
Sure.
like bigger enclosures, right?
Generally,
But
yeah.
I mean, yeah, generally. But I mean, I've been really into like oddball fish,
Mm-hmm.
like Indostomus, Paradoxus, and Crocodilus, and like the clown killies and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I have those somewhere in Blackwaterscape. They hide, obviously, because you provide them with the appropriate environment and they burrow and they just eat the microorganisms and they don't really come out. But yeah, I'm really interested in those. I mean, I don't know if this counts, but my pearl gouramis I absolutely adore. They're so friendly and vibrant, and
Yeah.
I'm really interested in fish and just keeping interesting species that kind of speak to me. So I have like a community tank here. It's my 90p, and it just has a bunch of different things in it. But again, with the saltwater side, I've always really been interested in keeping different kind of saltwater fish. So my dream fish that I would love to have one day is a mandarin goby.
Mm,
They're beautiful,
so
but
cool.
again, they require like huge pod population, and I don't think that I could give them that environment. So I haven't been able to do that yet. Maybe if I have a bigger house, but I do have some orange storm clownfish and like a blood shrimp, and I love the way that they. I love how they interact with you and how friendly they are, and they come up to you, and the blood shrimp will like come up to your hand and eat right from you, and so I've always been interested in that, and that's pretty much what drew me to reef keeping in the beginning as well. So, and it's what keeps me in aquascaping as well. I love to create a habitat around those fish.
Mm.
That's what really speaks to me. So for my, I have like a carnivorous paludarium, and there's an alien beta fish in there, and I made it for that. Like I knew that I wanted to have those fish in there. I had a pair of beta albin marginata. The male died because they kept breeding and he just was holding eggs for too long, and I think he just starved to death. I would have had to separate them, which I just didn't have the knowledge, but now I do. Unfortunately, it was too late. But yeah, so I have the female in there, and I love her. So I'm a fish collector as well. Like I collect pretty high end interesting fish.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It's cool that that's a part of it
It's
for you too. Yeah,
Yeah, it is a part
it's
of it for me. It's a different itch though. Like it's
yeah.
completely separate from the meditative. It's That's more of like collector and um yeah, just providing a great environment for them where they can thrive,
Yeah.
and that's what is another element to my aquascaping is what can I put in there that will make those animals the happiest.
Well, even
But
even
yeah.
that process is
Yeah.
it's different, but it's fun. It's cool to wake up on a Saturday morning and know that you're going to go out looking for a certain fish, a certain thing. That's it's a whole different exercise. It is definitely part of the hobby that is it's got its own sort of cool factor to it, or something that's still sort of inspiring, or just
Yeah.
fun. It's cool to explore that side as well. You mentioned your paludarium, and
Yeah.
that's definitely something that I've seen you doing a lot more of. Is the
Hmm.
small terrarium, paludarium, and yeah, you've got a real skill set with that. That's which is harder because I think it's not you don't see as many sort of examples of it out there. So we're still in a period where I think people are really coming up with kind of their own visions, their own ideas for it, which is really cool. But was that just kind of a natural extension of aquarium keeping and aquascaping in general for you?
It's what started me in aquascaping.
Oh,
My
wow.
first aquascape was Paludarium. Yeah,
Okay.
it was the DOA H36 with the Wabikusa wall, and I
Oh,
got
yeah.
it like I was all in, and I was like, okay, what's Wabikusa? Like, how can I figure this out? So I had the Wabikusa mats. I tied all the plants to the mats. You put them on the wall, you arrange them in whatever composition you want. I would move them around actually, which was kind of cool. Like, and that's what I liked about it because I really wanted to engage with it and continue to engage with it, and that was a way that I felt like I could in the beginning. Um, but yeah, I started with paludariums, and that's where my passion lies. I love the combination of terrestrial plants continuing into the water and immersed growth and just that union of underwater and above water is really
Mm.
interesting to me. And I have a new passion for carnivorous plants, and to be able to incorporate that into a paludarium, which I don't think many people have done so far that I've seen,
Yeah.
is it's an experiment and things have gone wrong, but most things have gone right because I did a lot of research and um, yeah, I just want to continue making those. And terrariums are are similar in that way, and I think they're easier to maintain, so it's kind of easier to have. And I have one terrarium, like my one terrarium that I started with was like this orchid terrarium, and I went to Florida and I got a bunch of orchids and I was so excited. And I just recently put an inhabitant in there. I put a jumping spider and she is loving it. And it's just again like it's so great to be able to provide a cool habitat for um, like an unconventional
Yeah.
little being. So yeah, I have a bunch of terrariums beside me right now that I'm actually gonna take to a store to sell.
Yeah, I
And
heard
I just
you
have so
you
much
recently
fun.
announced you've got a new little project, little venture
Yeah,
going
yeah,
on with the terrarium side. What can you tell us about that?
yeah. Very little right now. I have, I was able to get some aquariums. So I have about 15 aquariums right now. Six of them are scaped, and I'm selling them to a store called Roehampton Orchids in Toronto. So that's kind of my business model right now, which is creating completed terrariums and selling them around the city of Toronto. Uh, with like local pickup in different stores. So I don't know if you know the store Planted Aquaria. It's an aquascaping store in
I've,
Oakville.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. George did a demo there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're gonna have some of mine as well in there, and
Awesome.
yeah, I'm really excited.
That's a cool, interesting, clever way to do it. I think is
Yeah.
kind of the making them and then putting them in the stores makes the stores, adds to their offerings. Uh,
Hmm.
Kind of brings that dimension to them without them necessarily having to take that on initially themselves anyway.
Hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a great concept. Um,
Yeah, I'm really excited. So I also have like an online store with a bit of equipment that I'm going to start. So I have some DOA equipment and some
yeah.
ADA stuff that I have started stocking, and I'm going to do terrarium kits. So, it'll include some moss and some, manzanita branches and some like soil or whatever you need for your orchids. I was going to use the tropical river soil, which is like the only cosmetic soil and is low in nutrients, so it's perfect for orchids and carnivorous plants. And I'm just trying to educate people on like how they can make these themselves, but also, have my own out there as
No,
well.
that's so helpful. I think that's a great concept where people can know that whatever they're getting with it is going to work. It's the right stuff. Because that was an obstacle for me for a long time, was just not being certain what the best combinations for things like substrates and all that were, and then
Mm,
not always having the time to research all of that, and then going down the research rabbit hole of
yeah,
five different things that five different people are saying that, which usually
yeah,
just means
yeah,
that it's not that crucial. It means there's a lot of different ways to do it, and they
yeah,
probably all have their merits. But that's a great idea to really kind of give people real clear access to stuff that you're using your examples to show, hey, this works. It's a lot of it's my whole approach to all this stuff. So I love when I see that idea that I'm going to show you it working and then say, well, here's the recipe. Um, and that's just, I always say it'd be like if you were making a new dish uh, and you're having a dinner party. So with a dinner party, you don't want to be experimenting too much. You sort of like, there's people coming over, you have guests, you want to serve them a nice meal, and yet you want to try and make something that you think would be amazing, but you've never made it before. Um, would you just guess how to make it? Would you do random research at the last minute to see how to make it? Or might you go get a recipe and follow along? Wow, if you could even get a recipe from somebody who had made that dish and you had already, that's somebody or whatever, and you'd already enjoyed that dish and thought, wow, that would be an amazing thing to make for my dinner party. How much closer you would get to it being an amazing dining experience if you followed a known recipe versus guessing or experimenting, all of which is fine, and cool things can happen from those processes. But there's a certain point at which I want to have a really predictable outcome. as opposed to going, well, I'm going to figure out how this works. And so I think
Yeah.
it's a big barrier to entry in all the different aspects, terrariums, aquascaping, marine tanks, aquarium keeping in general. I think has a lot of that. How did you come about? What were the initial sort of pointers for you when you're keeping marine tanks? You see this possibility of freshwater and aquascaping, even terrarium, paludarium stuff. Was this just a YouTube sort of research, or what gave you the confidence to go ahead and try it, or go, okay, well, I know it at least requires X to do. What was that? What
Yeah.
was that sequence like for
So,
you?
I mean, the sequence was seeing beautiful aquascapes first and seeing beautiful paludariums first, and then backtracking and saying, how can I recreate this? So I remember, I think it was like on my explore page on Instagram, I saw someone, his name is South Bay Aqua. That's his Instagram handle. And I saw his DOA H36 paludarium with a Utricularia carpet. And I was like, that is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I've never seen like a lawn underwater. How is that even possible? And then I didn't know about, you know, plant I didn't know that aquariums could be planted to that degree, and I didn't understand how they could be planted to that degree and not be riddled with algae. And so then I went into the YouTube rabbit hole, and I remember I came across George Farmer, and I watched like his. I remember going through like video one of his channel, and then going all the way up to like his most recent stuff. And this was probably like 5 years ago that I started researching that. And then like slowly I built up. I remember I wrote a list of all the equipment I would need. I gave myself a budget because I was still a student, so I couldn't afford ADA products. Like I didn't know. So um, I got a job for like my first job out of university. I was like, I think I can buy these ADA products now. And I had this big list, and I went online and I purchased everything from the US because you can't get any of that stuff in Canada, or couldn't at that time. So I spent a ton on import fees, but it was worth it because I needed to get my ADA products.
Right.
And yeah, because I wanted to make it like my vision of this art piece. And to me, like that brand um, gets it. And when I discovered ADA, then I discovered Takashi Amano, and then you go down that rabbit hole, and once you go down
It's a
that
deep
rabbit
one.
hole, there's really no coming back.
Yeah.
But it was always paludariums. That was always the first thing that I wanted to try. And so I did the Utricularia carpet, and that's the first thing that I did, and it was successful, and it lasted for like over a year. And I don't know how I maybe it was beginner's luck, but I did. Yeah, I did a ton of research on that, and that's what got me into carnivorous plants and everything. But yeah,
Really cool. That
many
you trick
rabbit holes, many rabbit holes.
isn't that plant is technically carnivorous, right?
It
Utricularia?
is, yeah,
Yeah.
and
But you
it
don't
is.
have to
Un-
you don't actually feed it anything. There's no it doesn't work like
It'll eat
that.
the microorganisms in the water.
Okay.
Yeah, it has these things called bladders, and they're like these tiny little traps that they have like at the end of their little
Structure.
pieces of
Yeah.
grass, whatever structure, and they'll trap microorganisms and dissolve them
Oh wow.
under the water and above the water. Like you could spot feed them, but it would have to be, yeah, like tiny, tiny microorganisms. Um,
That's
I
that's
actually
one I gotta
have, yeah, you got to
that's
try it. My carnivorous paludarium is has a wall of Utricularia, all different types of Utricularia. So terrestrial Utricularia and graminifolia, which is their only like one of the only aquatic species, I believe. Yeah.
which will grow but
So
I mean
it's
it grows well submersed or immersed, or I mean it does both.
exactly
Yeah.
does
I have
both.
so little
I
experience
think
with
it
that
grows
plant.
better immersed.
Yeah.
Yeah, It's I have so much experience with that plant. It's been the past 3 years. Pretty much every aquarium I've had and every paludarium I've had has had Utricularia in it, and I just love it so much. I love the texture of it. I love the color of it.
Is
Yeah,
there a
I love how it
core
grows.
sort of? I'm genuinely asking you because it's the reason I avoid it is because I tried it when it was like very, very, very first available. I mean, it just showed up on the
Okay.
scene. Nobody really had much experience with it, but maybe like probably Tom Barr, somebody had grown it in some kind of way because he can grow anything. And you're going, oh my gosh, wow, what is that? I got to have that. I got to try that. So, um, and it would always start off well, and then every time, I mean, this happened enough times where I just said, well, I'm not messing with that anymore. But it would get kind of
Yeah.
a, a brown ring. It was always like a circle it would just sort
Hmm.
of turn brown like it was dying in the middle, and then it would just spread out. So if I had a carpet of it, I had gotten it to carpet, and then out of the blue, here comes the brown ring, some kind of rot or something, and it would just rip through the whole. It would just work its way from a small point to consuming all of it. Um, and then there was a few times where I just couldn't really get it going. But I think how to keep it's become well known. Is there any sort of takeaway tip, or am I overthinking it? Is there not anything all that special about keeping it?
I
Just treat it
think
like any other plant.
treat it like a carnivorous plant. So treat it in a like it loves nutrient poor environments. So if you have
Okay.
aqua soil, that's going to kill it over time because it
Okay.
can't handle the high nutrient levels. Um, if you can
Maybe that I
use,
definitely had it in aqua soil when it would. Maybe that was had something to do with the this kind of mysterious,
yeah,
look like a crop circle in there that would then expand out.
yeah.
Um, so you don't
I
keep it
don't
in
know
soil.
exactly what that would. No, the first time I did keep it in soil, but I did water changes with reverse osmosis water, like only reverse osmosis water, not remineralized. And I was
Ah.
only using the minerals from the soil itself, and I think that's what
Okay.
saved me. But
Okay.
now I use pure reverse osmosis water for all of my paludariums
Okay.
that have the carnivorous plants because again, like and orchids in them as well because they need nutrient poor environments.
Ah.
So yeah, I would really suggest using like again the DOA tropical river soil is a fantastic product. I really
Okay.
recommend that. Planting it in that or even planting it in like you could even, I don't know if you could plant it in like cosmetic sand or something because it might be too thick, but like a mix of soil and sand or something like that. But there's like bog specific soils that you can get that are low in nutrients. But yeah, avoid aqua soil at all costs because
I
over
feel
time they'll
like
just melt.
okay. I mean, I feel like I
Yeah.
do see it used in some ADA layouts here, kind of in the modern
Hmm.
era, um, where they've got it in soil. But ADA has that magic water there at the gallery in northern Japan that might be
I'm
a
curious to
contributing
see
factor.
I don't know if I'm curious to see if it's actually like their Amazonia aqua soil or whatever it is, but I know the longevity of the carpet, it will last longer if it's in a nutrient poor environment, for
Okay.
sure.
And then I thought
Yeah.
that was interesting. You mentioned just RO water,
Hmm.
no GH booster, no remineralization in there, and that would be the primary water you're keeping in a paludarium. You're
Hmm.
just using just straight RO.
Straight arrow. Yeah.
Is that for
Yeah.
reasons beyond the carnivorous plants?
No, it's for the carnivorous plants because the
Okay.
majority of like everything above the water in my carnivorous paludarium is carnivorous plants. I don't have plants below the surface
Okay.
in in my small paludarium, so there's really no need
Sure.
for it, like for remineralized water. But in my 90p, I do half and half, so I'll do like remineralized water or partially remineralized water just with low minerals and my booth is flowering so I think it's it's doing I'm doing something right.
Right.
I do have some soil in the back of that tank but yeah it's
N-
just a delicate balance I would say
Sure.
and trial and error.
I
Yeah.
take it so you're not paying any real intensive attention to GH values or hardness, and I don't suspect there's a lot of water testing going on there. You're going off of kind of a general sense of what those plants need, and just sort of adapting your approach from there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think
Yeah.
I've kind of learned what those plants needed over time, and yeah, I've adapted to it, and they're doing really well. Like all of my Utricularia above the water, or like on my wall, is flowering, and everything seems really happy. So it's what works for me. I mean,
Yeah.
it might work different for someone
Do
else, but
you, when you
yeah,
use RO water, I mean, these are just sort of practical questions I'm always curious about, just
yeah.
how people do their maintenance, or how people work, or what their kind of their setup looks like. So, do you have an RO water system there in your place, or is that something that, oh, okay. S-
Well, kind of. I mean, my apartment again is so small and I don't
Right.
really have a dedicated place for it. So I have like an RO unit and then I have an adapter ring and I set it up on my shower and I take the shower head down and I plug that into the shower and then I have 5 gallon jugs and I just fill the jugs. So I have 4 5 gallon jugs and I'll just go through those.
What's the nature of that RO system? So that's not something that's traditionally like tied into the plumbing, and then you've got a vat, and you're getting the cart. Is this like a one
It's
of
like a
those?
portable four
Okay,
stage.
yeah,
Yeah, so it has like yeah, 4 stage. It has like a membrane. I don't know. I don't know the logistics.
sure, but it's
But
something that's worked for you. Is the takeaway? You're in a small space, and you've been able to have this access to RO water. Um, yeah, I'm
I used
actually,
to get it delivered,
yeah,
actually, and
I'm,
it was quite expensive to get delivered, so I bought my own
yeah.
system.
Right. Or
Yeah.
a lot of people, we sell RO water, for example. People come in with their 5 gallon
Mhm.
jugs. I just think that long term, that's not a great setup, because, how many years are you going to keep? I mean, when it's new and you're excited about it, and you're enthusiastic, you want to go to the store, to the fish store. You got to grab some water, but you're going to look at stuff anyway. Um,
Right.
After some time, though, you still loving your tanks and want to keep them well, but that routine can really get tiring. So, um, yeah, I
Yeah,
may
and
follow up with you and
yeah.
ask for maybe a, a link or something of the unit that you're using,
Yeah,
and maybe
yeah, I
we can
can send that
post
too.
post it in the description and all that sort of thing. Because that to me, that you're in a really small space like that, and you're able to have that many uh, different layouts going, and I think RO water is just a big, big part of that, whether you're just using it straight or doing some GH adjustments or remineralization. And I think
Hmm.
it's a big part of why a lot of people struggle, because the tap water supply where they're at is just, uh, even if it's sort of okay, the fluctuations can be such a huge problem. I've just learned that over the course of, a given period of time, a municipal water supply may see quite a bit of adjustment for how much rain there's been. And it's just a huge spectrum of things that, while they're not going to affect its ability to be safe to shower in or drink or whatever,
Hmm.
I mean, I don't drink it, but anyway, but how it's going to impact an aquarium is a whole different story. So yeah, I'd be real curious to see what you got going there. And I think that's actually, I love finding these little hidden gems in these conversations. Things
Hmm.
like that. Oh, okay. Oh, there's actually a portable one, and something you can just use sort of on demand, that'll give you the water that you're looking for anyway. Because there's all kinds of water filter things out there, but they don't necessarily give us that aquarium quality, or that RO level water that we're seeking. Is that something you just found
Yeah, and
online?
this one's pretty small. It's like, yeah, I just found it online. I had it through my reef keeping days actually, because obviously with, like reef tanks, you need reverse osmosis water, and then you add in the salt. So I had that when I was in my old apartment as well, because I used to go to the store and get salt water and bring it up 4 flights of stairs like every week. I would do that, and that was too
Yeah.
much. So
It just gets
I got
old.
my own
Yeah.
system, but it's like this big. It's pretty small. I keep it in my closet most of the time, and then I hook it up to my shower when I
Perfect.
need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here, I'm serious. I'm geeking out on this thing right now. I know I'm probably spending too much time on the portable RO, but I think it's one of those things. It's like, it's not the most exciting topic, but it's, it's something that is a great facilitator of like consistency, which is the cornerstone of success. With once you put a live plant in or near water, um, it's a different game than just having a fish tank with some rocks
Mhm.
and some fish and some plastic things or whatever. And so these little things like being able to easily get RO waters, I just think it's a big deal. It's something I'm more and more kind of obsessed with right now, is figuring out how do you get this to more people. Um,
I think
so
I'm a great example of that because of where I live and the
yeah,
space I live in, you know. I live in the middle of the city. I don't have access to a car, and live in a tiny apartment, so
yeah,
everything has to be portable. All my setups are nano, except for like my 90, which was a big struggle getting that into this apartment. But,
yeah,
you know, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm a great example of like just scrappiness and trying to make things work in a tiny place.
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially Toronto is. I recently saw something on. It was something that was on the TV. I did just one of the things you stumble into, but it was about Toronto, and
Hmm.
it sounds like an amazing city.
Love it here.
That is really uh, this just. It is the definition of it. It's the true melting pot, from what I understand. Like, you just have so many different cultures. Uh, not a lot of the people there aren't necessarily from there. It's been a
Oh,
destination for tons
yes.
of people, and so you just get a really interesting spectrum of humanity there. So it just
It's
looked, it
amazing.
was I was like really fascinated by the whole, and that was the whole take on this sort of portrayal of Toronto, was just the profound diversity um, of it, and just kind of what it is to be I think it's Torontonian. I think
Yeah.
was the
That's
term.
right. That's right. Yeah,
How's the hobby there? How's the aquarium scene there?
it's growing slowly. We
Hmm.
have one dedicated aquascaping shop now, which is Planted Aquaria in Oakville. So it's out of the city, but there are a few online shops that have been popping up here and there that sell aquascaping dedicated products now. Um, I have a lot of friends here in Toronto that are aquascapers. So I don't know if you have you met Vince? Maybe. Vince, his Instagram is Drinks and Scapes. I know your brother met him, but I
Oh
don't know if
right,
you
yeah,
met.
sure, yeah. I know often know people by their Instagram page.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's one of my best friends. We met just online through aquascaping, and we've gone to Aqua Shella together, and I go to his house all the time. We collaborate on tanks, and so there's a community of people that have been built up over the past, I would say, 2 years. I'd say there's probably about 10 of us that I really know well. We go to dinner sometimes, and we meet up, and we, yeah, collaborate on tanks and stuff. So it's growing, but it's still quite niche and quite small. So I think I want to be able to introduce more people to aquascaping myself and terrariums and stuff. So I think like my store is going to be, and my selling of completed terrariums within stores is going to be a part of that. Hopefully, we'll see.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I think so. And there's going to be a website. Do you have any kind of? Are you ready to point
Yeah, I'm
anyone to that
I'm
website just yet, or?
I think so. When will this episode be out?
Um, it
Like,
it 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 might be out today.
okay.
I'm a little behind since because
Okay.
of the Heiko debacle, but yeah.
Um, yeah, it's alexscapes.ca, and I think it'll be ready later today. I'm planning on launching, and I'm gonna make a post on
Awesome.
Instagram and have it up and running. So yeah,
Awesome. Wow. That's
really
exciting
excited.
news. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, this has been an awesome conversation. It's been a real pleasure. And I'm excited about learning about this portable RO system from you. I'm
I'll
geeking out on
send
the
you a link.
RO thing still. No, totally do. But incredible story. And you've got an immense amount of some of the most practical knowledge out there because of what you're doing there in your own home and the whole home studio sort of vibe that I think is really intriguing to a lot of people. You've got that down, and I think there's going to be a lot of interest in anything you're doing that's sort of coming from your experience there and what you've been sharing with us here through this, what I think is just one of the coolest stories and one of the most, the journey itself is just something I think will resonate with a lot of people. So thanks so much for chatting with me today. And I really look forward to talking to you again. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was great being on here. Thank you.
Cool. So, and I'll be sure and post all the links in the description for you. And very best of luck with the new terrarium venture. And
thank you.
Yeah, look forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. Really
All right,
appreciate
thanks,
it.
Alex. Take care.
All right, bye.